Hello, this is Peter Kench1913, and this is another Game of Thrones review. This time we're reviewing Episode 3, Lord Snow. So, in this episode, let's quickly go through what happened in the episode, okay? So, basically, as you remember in this last episode, Ned killed a lady who was Sansa's direwolf, and Bran woke up, and that's how we ended the episode. So, in the beginning of this one, Ned and the party get to King's Landing, and basically they are summoned, or Ned is summoned to the small council because, well, let's move it this way, yeah. Ned is summoned to the small council. There we go. Sorry. Ned is summoned to the small council, okay, so that he can meet and they can start doing business and whatnot, government and all that. So Ned and Ned meets Jaime Lannister in the in the throne room, which they show the Iron Throne for the first time. It basically the Iron Sword, or the Iron Throne is made up of swords of various fallen people, various fallen warriors, and yeah, it was made in Dragonfire, which is pretty cool. So they have some words about the history of what happened, like Ned's dad and bro were killed in there with the king, and then Ned's like talking about how Jaime like stabbed the king in the back and this, that, and the other. So then they show Ned going into the small council, and now the small council is made up of a couple of people. All right, the first guy that I'm going to go through is Lord Varys. All right, and he is called the Spider. He's played by Conleth Hill, and he's awesome. He's pretty cool. He's a cool character. He's the Spider, and basically he's kind of like the secret. He's like the secret, like the CIA kind of thing, where he's the guy who they go to for gathering information. The second guy on the list is Peter Baelish, or Littlefinger, as they will call him, played by Aidan Gillian, and he is the master of the coin. He's basically the kingdom's treasury, and he basically deals with all the money. Next guy is Grand Maester Pycelle, and he's played by Gillian Glover, who was also in Indiana Jones and The Last Crusade. But also there was, and he is the he's the head maester in charge. As I was telling you last week, maesters are kind of like holy guys who are kind of like doctors and priests and like wise men all wrapped into one. He's like the main guy for the capital. Then we have Renly Baratheon, who is Robert's little brother, and he's played by Gethin Anthony. I don't know if I said that name right. And he is just, I don't remember what he is in the book, in the show. They don't really tell you. I want to say in the book he was the master of no, maybe he wasn't. I was gonna say the boats, but no, that's not true. I don't remember what he was. He's just Robert's brother, so he's there. And then there's one guy they don't really mention. His name is Baraniston Selmy, and he's basically he's called the head of the Kingsguard, and he's played by Ian McKinney. Although McKinney, we won't see him until later, but I just figured I'd throw him in there. So, anyways, they talk about how Robert wants to have a tournament in honor of Ned becoming the new Hand of the King. But basically, they find out that the tournament, or that the kingdom is like 6 million dragons or gold in debt. So they don't really want to have it done. And then Ned kind of like leaves because he's pretty tired. So then they cut over to Joffrey and Cersei, and Cersei's healing Joffrey's wounds from the direwolf bite, and she was saying how he doesn't want to marry Sansa, and what else? Like, then they kind of go into how ruthless Joffrey is, talking about how he wants to, like, if he was king, he would get rid of the lords of the north and make an army, and then make the army have to go to them and tax them. And that scene's kind of like basically showing how ruthless Joffrey can be, and how Cersei, she's She's very protective of him. So then they go back to Sansa and Arya, and look who's here, Kitty. Anyways, they go back to Sansa and Arya, who's having dinner with Septa Mordain, and she's played by, look at this cat. Come on, go, go, go. She's played by Susan Brown, Septa Mordain. She is the lady who came from Winterfell along with them. She's kind of like a if what is it? The Maesters are like priests. The Septas are kind of like nuns, and so she's kind of like the nun down there, and she's kind of teaching them all kinds of stuff. Listen, Kitty, you gotta get off. Sorry about that. Anyways, they have a fight because she's mad because she, Arya is still mad at Sansa for lying and not remembering what was going on. So she leaves, and Ned has to discipline her. So Ned heads into the room where Arya is at, and Arya has her sword out, and basically Ned kind of tells her, he kind of warns her that they're in a dangerous spot, and that she's gonna have to. There can't be any fighting between the Starks because they're in like a dangerous area. There's all kinds of people looking to do bad things to them. So then we head back to Winterfell where Bran is laying, and he's in this bed. He's sad, and he's a cripple, sadly. An old Nan, she's this old lady. She's like one of the oldest living ladies in Winterfell. She basically is just some old lady who tells stories and kind of like a servant of the House Stark. I figured I'd throw in her name's Margaret John, and she's a pretty good old Nan. She kind of tells Bran a story about the White Walkers and how they kind of originated, although it's just a story, so no one really knows if it's true. And then what is it? Robb comes in and he tells Bran, don't worry, you'll be able to do stuff again. And then he's like, I'd rather be dead. And he said, don't ever say that. And he's like, I'd rather be dead. And then we go to Lady Stark, who gets to King's Landing and is taken to a whorehouse by Littlefinger. Apparently, her and Littlefinger have a history together. And basically, Littlefinger and Lord Varys, and Catelyn Stark, they discuss about the knife that she brought to King's Landing, and basically we find out that the knife is actually Tyrion's knife, Tyrion the little guy, his knife, and then we go back to Castle. Well, actually, we go to Castle Black for the first time, which is basically the castle right before the wall. Okay, and how that works is Jon is mopping the floor with the recruits. All right. And, there we meet, do we meet someone? We meet this guy named Alistair Thorne. He's one of the Night's Watch. He's a ranger, and he's in charge of training the new recruits. He's played by, where is he? Owen Teale, and he's a real jerk, okay? Let's just leave it at that. So he's whipping the floor with the new recruits. And then we go back to King's Landing, where Littlefinger is talking, because they all get news that Bran is alive and he's woken up, and we get Littlefinger talks to Ned about seeing his wife again, and he takes him to the whorehouse, and then Littlefinger kind of gets beat up a little bit by Ned, but then from there they do a good job of keeping the flow of the episode going. So they switch back to Jon back at the Castle Black, and he's putting away his stuff from the training that he's been doing, and basically he gets into a fight with all the other recruits because he mopped the floor with them, and he's making them look bad. So then kind of Tyrion comes in and saves the day and tells them that he'll get like his sister, Cersei, to kill him because she's the queen and whatnot. And so he kind of saves them. And he explains to Jon that these kids have never held a sword before. You've had the opportunity to have like an actual knight train you in swordplay. So that Jon kind of like, oh, you know what, maybe I'm being a dick. So then they go back to King's Landing, where Littlefinger agrees to help Ned figure out, because because basically what it was is Littlefinger was in love with Catelyn, and something happened. It'll get explained later. Littlefinger lost a bet to the guy who was going to marry Catelyn before Ned, and then some stuff happened. Yeah, or actually, the guy who was going to marry marry Catelyn before was Ned's bro, and he died, and so Ned married her. So he was always in love with her. So he agreed to help figure out like the whole thing about the dagger and why they would want to kill the little boy, and he's going to help out. He's going to help out Ned. So then we go to a scene where Jaime and Cersei learn that Bran is still alive, and Jaime's like, I don't care, I'd kill the whole world for you just to have you, blah blah blah, and he kind of like threatens her and whatnot. They probably do it, but whatever. And then we go to a scene where Catelyn leaves Ned, and then we go to another scene in King's Landing the next day, where Robert and Baraniston Selmy, who again, he's the head of the Kingsguard. Basically, they're a group of knights in the realm who guard the king. They that's all they do. They guard. They're like the king's guard. They protect him, kind of like Secret Service kind of thing. And Baraniston Selmy is basically the head of the Kingsguard. And so they're kind of talking about like the people that they killed, the first people they killed and stuff like that. And then they bring in Jaime, and then this kind of helps to add like fill in some backstory about the characters, like because I'll get into it. So then they talk about first deaths and this, that, and the other, and Robert kind of mocks Jaime because he's like, you're just like a glorified, bodyguard kind of servant fella. And then we finally head across the sea to Dany, where she is looking more like a Dothraki every episode. And she's talking with Jorah Mormont, and she kind of sees these slaves being whipped, so she gets off, and she goes into the grass. And basically then Viserys, her bro, comes out, and he's really pissed because he's like, how dare you try to give me an order. And then he gets mad, and Dany finally stands up to him because one of the Dothraki guys, his name is Rakaro, and he's played by Elias Gable, and he basically like he takes his whip and he chokes Viserys out, and she kind of stands up for herself there, and then he's got to walk. And then we go back to the wall where Jon takes the lift. It's an elevator all the way to the tip top of the wall where he talks to Benjen, and he says, Benjen, let me go. And Benjen's like, you're not Night's Watch yet. Stay here and become a man and whatnot. And then Benjen basically, he said he was going to go the next day. He was going to go to the wall or beyond the wall and search for the wildlings, because apparently there's some activity going on there. And then we head back to inside Castle Black, where Tyrion is talking with Yoren, and Yoren is played by Francis McGee. And who he is, he's basically the recruiter of the Night's Watch, or the Rangers or whatever. So he goes from kingdom to kingdom collecting prisoners and whatnot to be recruits for the Night's Watch. So then Tyrion and him are kind of joking around about stuff, and then Benjen comes in, and they kind of talk about how Tyrion thinks that he says, oh, you think the Night's Watch is just kind of like a big joke to you? And he's like, no, we're up here protecting the realm. And so he kind of tells about how the Night's Watch isn't doing too hot now. And then we go back to Daenerys, who we find out from her handmaiden Irri, who's played by Amrita Arachi, or something like that. I'm sorry if I mispronounce them. But she sees that Dany's pregnant. And so they go to find out. And then she goes to tell Jorah and Rakaho. And basically Jorah leaves, which is a little suspicious. Let's see. Then what happens? John basically, we go back to Castle Black. John starts training the new recruits a little bit more instead of just beating the hell out of them. He's kind of trying to show them like new moves, where they're going wrong, and this, that, and the other. And then Tyrion's kind of watching them, and then Tyrion's talking to the commander of the Night's Watch, whose name is Jorah Mormont. I think I'm saying that right, Jorah Mormont, and he's played by James Cosmo, who was in Braveheart, and I think he's a perfect fit. And they call him the Old Bear sometimes because the Mormont, their family crest is a bear, and so he went to the Wall, and he's the new commander. He's talking with him and Maester Aemon, who is the Maester of Castle Black, and he's played by Peter Vaughan, and he's supposed to be blind and whatnot. And they're just discussing about how dire their situation is up in the Wall, on how dire it is, how they have less than 1,000 people, and their stuff is being really crappy and stuff, and like they don't have a lot of equipment left, and they don't have a lot of food and whatnot, and so they need help from the king. And they ask Tyrion to make sure to tell his sister, because she's the queen, to get more people to come to the Night's Watch. And then we go back to Dany and Khal Drogo, and they're kind of like laying in bed after doing it, and she's telling them that her baby will be a son. And as you can tell during that scene, that like they kind of like fell in love together, like in the beginning. It was just like he was just mounting her as a horse and whatnot, but now they're kind of like in love, and she kind of has the same kind of power as he does, at least when they're in the bedroom and whatnot. So then we go back to Tyrion, who's on the Wall. He's pissing off of it, and Jon comes up, and Jon says, they kind of become friends. Tells them to take care. If you see my bro Bran, tell him I miss him, and hopefully you can see him. And then, he kind of understands a little bit. They kind of form this little bond. So then at the end of the episode, Arya, because Ned let her keep the sword. I don't know if I mentioned that, but when Ned went to see Arya, she had a sword, and he said, you can keep it. So Arya begins to train and sword fight with this guy named Syrio Forel, who's played by Mitos Uriomou. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that. What are you going to do? And he is awesome. He's basically a guy. He's kind of like a Spaniard. He's a guy from across the sea from this place called Bravos. And he kind of begins to teach her how to sword fight. And as Ned's watching, you can hear at the very end, like the tides of war and noises of war as they're fighting. And it's kind of an interesting way to end the episode. So now that we're done with the summary, and I know it's taking a while, but I'm trying to get this. I'm trying to summarize it a little faster, but I think that was pretty good. So let's go over some of the stuff. New characters. Who do I like? Who do I dislike? Well, there's 3 new characters that I really, really enjoyed in this episode. It's basically Syrio Forel, the the sword guy. Littlefinger, I like him a lot, even though he looks a little mysterious. He's kind of mysterious. And Varys, Lord Varys, he seems pretty mysterious too. And I kind of like him because I kind of like the idea that they're both kind of in power. They're both shady guys. It's like you don't know where the motives are yet. So it's like, you know what? I want to watch these guys. I want to see what's going to go on. Dislikes any characters? I didn't really dislike any of the characters. I think there's a good amount of them now. I think it's not too bad. So let's see. Is the episode staying true to the book? What are the differences? So I think this episode again is staying fairly true to the book. Now, one thing about the book is that it's actually made of point of view characters. So, at certain instances, you're not going to be able to see interactions between characters who are not the main characters in the story. So Ned is a main character, Arya is a main character, Sansa's a main character, Jon's a main character. But the conversations between Robert and Selmy are not shown in the book. So it's kind of interesting that they took these scenes, and you kind of have to infer that this stuff is actually happening. Like another scene like that would be I'm trying to remember what the other scene. Oh, where Jaime and Cersei are talking. That's one scene that like was in the book, but you know they have to have that in there because it's like you gotta kind of infer what's going on and whatnot. And so there's a couple of scenes in the show that aren't actually in the book, but they make 100% sense. Like Robert isn't the king. Robert, he isn't a main character, a main point of view character in the story, but the stuff that he talks about really gives his character more depth, and you know, and you get to find out more about him other than he's just the king and he's kind of like this drunkard now. So you know, this again, the story is staying very close to the book still. I mean, it's only the 3rd episode. So best line, best kill. Okay, so there were actually no deaths in this episode, so there is no. I don't have a favorite kill, but I actually have 3 favorite lines from this episode. Okay, and I think they all fairly good. So let's go through them. Everyone who isn't us is an enemy. That's a line from Cersei. She says it to Joffrey, which really tells about her character with, you know, just her being Lannister, and you know, Lannisters are, at least she thinks, are numero uno and everything. And then there's a line that Ned says after not only Arya is mad at her, but Sansa is mad at her. He says, "War is easier than daughters," which is probably true. I don't know. I don't have any at this point in the game. Anyways, and then there's a line where Maester Aemon, the Maester of the Castle Black, says, "The Starks are always right. Eventually winter is coming." So I think that's kind of funny because that's the Starks like catchphrase or whatever. Winter is coming, and you know, it is true. Winter is coming unless you're in winter, and then it's not really coming. And then finally, the last one is from my favorite character of the episode, definitely this episode, is Syrio Forel, and he says, "All men are made of water. You know this. If you pierce them, the water leaks out and they die." So I really like that. I really like that quote. Actually, there's one other thing I wanted to talk about. What I liked or disliked about this episode. What I liked the pacing. It was very fast. They kept going back and forth. They didn't kind of keep it too long in one spot, which was very good. But the only thing I disliked about this episode, and I'm saying this as in a perspective as I've never read the book before, is there's a ton of characters in this episode, ton of new characters, and it's just sometimes there's just too many characters, you know what I mean? But again, they pull it off very well. They briefly kind of describe or kind of tell like a line or two about who this character is, so you kind of know who they are as it goes through. So once again, if you're watching this, leave comments. Let's talk about you know, all the topics that we've talked about today. So this has been Pete, or Kenshin 1913, and this has been another Game of Thrones review. See you later. Bye-bye.